They can't do this, it's disgraceful. I mean, a human? What could he have possibly done besides being exceptionally average in every conceivable manner? General Karn, it was nearly unanimous in the Senate. I think you're just jealous someone else is going to be in the limelight for a change. But two in the same century? And to a human no less. Honestly, they're handing them out to anyone now. What next? They're going to give one to a Lethan for getting above-average scrap in his junk scavenging quota? Well, before you come to your conclusions too quickly, General, let's at least give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe this human was slightly above average. Ambassador Calix chuckled. But I do agree, it's far too soon. I mean 11 medals in 5,000 years, and we get to witness 2 in our lifetime? Regardless, I am happy for another holiday being added to the human calendar on the dreadful occasion that I have to work with them again. General Karn grumbled as they made their way down the red carpet that stretched up the steps of the Great Hall. General Karn was greeted with a spectacular fanfare of music and cheers as he stepped through the entryway. As the last recipient of the Galactic Honor Medal, he would be one of the guests of honor for the ceremony. Just yesterday, he turned down the offer to be the one to personally gift the medal to the human, saying his presence alone would be enough of an honor. He made his way to his seating near the front of the opulent awards hall and took his place near the podium. In his seat was a small paper-bound book titled The Escido Conflict, a first-hand account. He picked up the volume with a grumble so he could sit down. Why did they think he wanted to waste his time with reading about Escido? He personally peer-reviewed countless publications on the military strategy and political consequences of Escido. He was sure he could retell the statistics and strategy of the Escido conflict better than any mere foot soldier on the ground. Seeing the Great Hall decorated for a Galactic Honor Medal was an opportunity very few would get to witness in their lifespan. And here he was seeing it all over again. But this time it wasn't adorned for him, but for some pitiful human. The massive banners that bore the insignia of his species' last ceremony had now been replaced with the emblem of the humans. It seemed rather distasteful to have his beautiful banners replaced with something so minimalist. The Great Hall had the capacity for nearly 1 million spectators from hundreds of different species, and for the second time in a century it was completely full. Once the remaining important dignitaries, ambassadors, and political and military leaders found their respective places, the ceremony began. The leader of the Terran Republic made their way on stage and gave his opening remarks. Nothing really worth paying attention to. General Karn was more focused on the empty seat near the podium, hoping to get a look at this supposed above-average human. He wanted to witness the man for himself and see what could be so special about him. Confusion was spreading across the crowd once more, and more people took notice of the strangely empty seat. This human is giving me more and more reasons to dislike him. I mean, not showing up to his own galactic honor ceremony? That should be a crime if you ask me, General Karn said to the ambassador seated next to him. Perhaps they have some grand entrance planned. Leave it to the humans to be overly extra with their presentations. They don't even have the decency to adhere to millennia of traditions. Well, if it gets any worse than this, they'll ensure they're never given the opportunity to earn another, which is fine by me. After the usual introductions and dreadfully boring formalities of starting the ceremony, General Karn finally blessed the speaking human with a modicum of attention. For over 5,000 years, the Galactic Honor Medal and its recipients has stood as a beacon for all of our members in service, from any origin or species. It represents something that anyone can strive to achieve, and to be the change that would impact the galaxy for the better. It is reserved for individuals who display acts of valor that save the lives of millions, whose actions single-handedly change the course of history as we know it, and whose displays of courage are to be remembered and appreciated by all. With this in mind, it is my hope that today we shall remember a soldier who has given more to the galaxy than anyone presently in this room. General Karn rolled his eyes at the last remark, thinking that it might have been somewhat directed at him. This human probably did not have the slightest comprehension of what he had to do to earn his. A soldier whose acts of uncontested bravery may be an example for all to strive for in their military service. United Terran Army Private John William Ringwet has distinguished himself from his peers by going above and beyond anything expected of him when he entered service to the Galactic Republic 1 year ago. And it is with great sadness that he is not present with us today to receive this honor in person. General Karn leaned over, whispering again, "Oh, I'm sure he has much more important things to do right now, but I guess desecrating the prestige of the most important award in the galaxy is pretty paramount." Ambassador Calix gave a small laugh. "And they refer to him in the past tense, as if he is someone different now, and is no longer the same human who earned this award." Private John William Ringuet graduated from the Terran Infantry Academy and Orbital Strike School, and immediately was sent to Eskydo to take part in the large-scale stabilization operation there. At 17 years of age, he left Earth and was dropped into one of the most hostile zones on the planet. After 3 months of fighting on the surface of Eskydo, it was seen as a losing battle, and his squad was issued an evacuation order. They were told to depart from the planet and leave it to its destruction. At around 1800 hours on the 7th of June, Terran Standard Time, his squad made the executive decision to stay behind to ensure the evacuation of Eskyadian civilians. At the time, they did not know it, but they were escorting the very last members of the Eskyadian species. Upon this revelation, though filled with countless people, the room had grown completely silent. Many had heard of the tragedies on Eskydo, but until now none had known just how severe the circumstances of the war had been, and how close the species was to complete extinction. His squad secured the only remaining spaceport on the planet and started the evacuation of the civilians. However, at the time of arrival, only 3 of the squad of 9 remained. His 2 squad mates, Staff Sergeant Andrew Miller and Technical Sergeant Brian Jones, took control of a military transport and set to bring the civilians out of the war zone. As they prepared to start the evacuation, they became aware of an enemy battalion expeditiously advancing towards the last remaining entry tunnel. Private John William chose to stay behind to ensure the safety of his squad and the civilians, in the hope that he could buy time for their withdrawal. Before their departure, Private John William sealed the doors to the facility and set up a hasty defense in the tunnel. At 2000 hours, a battalion of enemy combatants aided with multiple military support vehicles began to assault the facility, set to ensure the complete extermination of the Eskydian people. Private John William placed himself between the attackers and the entrance door at the end of the tunnel and attempted to stave them off. Ignoring insurmountable odds, Private John William continued to fight in an unwinnable battle against an unending enemy opposition. Beset by an endless barrage of machine gun fire and plasma fire, Private John William held the line for the 4 hours it took to evacuate the civilians. It took nearly 3 trips to transport all of the citizens from the port. When they began their transport trips, military forces had already completely withdrawn from the surface of Eskydo. As the final soldier on the front lines in the Eskydo conflict, Private John William gave the ultimate sacrifice, knowing that there would be no reinforcements and no evacuation for himself. For his utmost bravery and courage in the face of an indomitable enemy, his actions reflect the highest glory upon himself and his unit. For his service on Eskydo and to the galaxy, Terran Republic. Private John William Ringuet is awarded the Galactic Honor Medal. Let it be known, a soldier does not have to return from a conflict to be recognized as the pinnacle of military valor. Private John William is the first individual to posthumously receive the Galactic Honor Medal. In your seats, you will find his personal diary of his time on Eskydo, published at his last request. It was his hope that the tragedy that transpired on Eskydo is never forgotten to history, and his first-hand account aids in making that possible. When his speech ended, the Great Hall did not cheer nor celebrate as it had for past ceremonies. No extravagant light display or confetti decorated the Great Hall and dazzled the spectators with the glory of the recipient as it normally would. The human speaker merely placed the medal atop an empty wooden casket that was hidden behind him and departed from the stage. The long and drawn-out tradition of handshakes and exquisite feasts did not follow the ceremony. What followed was a procession of delegates and dignitaries paying respects to the empty casket that symbolized the recipient of the award. General Karn looked down at the paper-bound book that was still in his claws, regretting that he was so quick to dismiss it earlier. He made a note to take the day off tomorrow so he could read it in its entirety. He walked up the stage and made his way towards the simplistic wooden box. He was not entirely sure what its purpose was, but it seemed to be something reserved for a solemn affair. After waiting in the line of people placing gifts and colorful flora from various worlds around it, it was his turn to pay his respects. Inside was a flag, a pair of small metal tags with human writing stamped into them, and the medal, which would normally be the center of attention. However, this piece of metal seemed rather minuscule in comparison to what it represented. He stood over the box and placed his clawed hand on the side of it. "Do you have anything to give, General?" asked Ambassador Calix in a small voice. "Nothing that would do him justice, only my condolences and apologies for how I composed myself earlier. I suppose this human was above average after all, but I now feel that would be quite an inadequate way to describe him." General Karn sat in his office. The floor-to-ceiling window that lined the far wall displayed a sprawling metropolis that sat at the galactic core. He looked down at the book resting in his claws, reading the title again, The Escaido Conflict, a first-hand account, written by Private J.W. Ringuet. After witnessing the award ceremony the day prior, he had decided to pick up what would be his first piece of human literature. He really was looking forward to seeing that particular human yesterday, but at the time, it had been for the wrong reasons. Now he had a different rationale for wanting to meet him, but that would not be possible. As meaningful as the ceremony was, the actual speech had been rather brief. Before attending, he would have been glad if someone told it would be short. He now knows that such a brief recollection of events did not do this human's actions justice. He remembered his own acceptance speech being nearly 3 hours long and included various celebrations throughout, as he covered every detail of his command decisions during his tenure in the Outer Belt Rebellion. But this award had differed greatly from every other galactic honor medal that had been given. This was the first time it had been given to someone who was not an officer, and not even a non-commissioned officer at that. This wasn't given to someone who had the luxuries of a command post off-world in a pristine office or a comfortable room aboard the galaxy's strongest dreadnought. This was given to someone who had been in the dirt and the mud and the blood, one who had seen the worst the galaxy has to offer and made something that mattered out of it. He poured himself a glass of methane-infused tea and leaned back in his chair, curling his scaled tail into a comfortable position. He opened the book and began to read the words written by the recently deceased soldier. Below are excerpts taken from the Escaido Conflict, a first-hand account, written by Galactic Honor recipient Private John William Ringuet during his short time on Escaido. Additional quotes are sourced from surviving Escaido soldiers and Terran military documents, along with statistical analyses of the conflict. February 28, 2287 Terran Standard Calendar. I wasn't always sure what I was going to end up doing. I mean, I knew I'd join the army, my dad was in the army, and his dad before him and so on. But I didn't know exactly what I would end up doing, if that makes any sense. 20 years with no combat, a boring desk job after 10, where's the fun in that? I wanted to do the things that kids read about in history books growing up. That's why I chose the infantry. I thought about the Navy, too. Loved pirates since I was a kid. Hell, I still am a kid. Maybe I joined to stand out, get noticed, which is pretty damn hard when you got 15 brothers and sisters all under the same roof. I joined up as early as I could, got my parents to sign the forms at 17, and a few months later I found myself here at Fort Benavidez. Training isn't bad, but sure was harder than running track for my high school back in Boston. Met some great guys here, only a few of us got an OD slot. Never thought I'd get the chance to see some action so early, but I've always wanted to do the things that a soldier's supposed to do, so this is my chance. We get our duty stations tomorrow. All but a few of us are going to Escaido. All the boys are excited, talking about all the aliens that they're gonna kill. I'm one of the ones that got an OD slot, so I'll actually get a real fucking combat jump. My brother is going to be so jealous when I get back with an orbital strike combat patch. March 22, 87. EasyCo 395 class consisted of 235 infantry graduates. 198 of them were sent to Escaido, all ages 17, 20. Only 26 survived. E395 in, Training Company March Graduates 2287. March 7, 2287 Terran Standard Calendar. Well, I passed orbital drop school. It was everything that I was expecting it to be and more. A welcome change of pace compared to infantry school, though. The food was better. We ran a lot more, which was fine by me. It was funny finishing all the runs minutes ahead of the other guys. I just sat there yelling at them, cheering them on when they passed the finish line. Sometimes the black hats would talk to me to pass the time. Other times they just said good job and left it at that. I wasn't really looking for their validation, but it was cool to get it. Guess all that time I spent running finally paid off, which is a good feeling. They say we're going to be at Escaido in less than a week. I'm getting nervous as it's getting closer. I mean, this is the first war that we've been in for almost a century. I finally understand how those soldiers felt back during D-Day and World War II. I wonder what it's like off-world. I don't know much about Escaido, but I think I remember some other guys saying it's cold. We've only been involved with all these different aliens for a few years, and we're already getting into a fight. I'm no politician, but I'm not sure that's a great look for intergalactic politics if you ask me. Oh well, all I gotta worry about is the cold, and I don't do well with the cold. But I guess it's my job to be uncomfortable. Now I just gotta embrace it. During Escaido, our paradroppers had a 75% fatality rate. If they survived entry, then they were often killed before joining up with their squad. 60% of paradroppers had less than 3 months of training. LT Colonel Mickey Hayes when asked about Escaido paradroppers. March 12, 2287 Terran Standard Calendar. Fuck, today was surreal. It honestly felt like a dream. Maybe fever dream would be the better way to describe it. We were all crammed into that shuttle when we reached orbit. We couldn't see outside to know what was going on, just had to trust our pilot to get us over the drop zone. We had a shaky entry, and the shuttle sounded like it was going to tear itself apart. We all lined up at the door as we felt the dropship heating up. Once we got the go-ahead, we were pushed out the door one by one. I looked up to see the shuttle itself nearly melted as the last few almost made it out. Then I got my first look at Escaido. I saw the vast, white expanse of ice and rocky hills that littered the landscape. Fuck, guess him fighting on Hoth. That's a cool way to look at this. Some cities were visible in the distance, but the biggest thing I noticed was the tracer fire. Well, I thought it was tracers. Turns out that was superheated plasma. Other shuttles weren't as lucky as ours, and several other paratroopers pulled too early, and their chutes got burned up by some stray shots. I waited for my altimeter to start beeping before I pulled the chute just like I'd been trained. I hit the ground. I'd done 2 drops before, but fuck, landing on rocks hurts a lot more than soft grass. There wasn't any cover around, but thankfully I was in a pretty secluded area. I pulled out my Terra map and started making my way to the rally point. As much as I loved rucking, I wasn't too keen on walking 12 miles in an active war zone all by myself. Oh well, just gotta embrace it. I got to the patrol base a few hours ago, chafing like a motherfucker and just wanting to stop walking. We had most of the platoon out here by the time I arrived. I had never actually met them before today. They didn't say much in the shuttle, but they said there was supposed to be a lot more of us. We holed up in the snow that night. I was thankful that we got issued the Arctic drop suit for this, and yet my hands are still trembling from the cold as I hold this pencil right now. Yeah, it was about -40 during the day to maybe -80 at night when I was on Escaido. Yay Celsius, so I guess that's around -100 for you Americans. I remember sometimes someone would get shot and they wouldn't bleed. Come to find out, the blood in the wound had already frozen solid the second it touched the air. SGT Takeshi Tiny Man Munamori when recalling Escaido. March 14, 2287, Terran Standard Calendar. I killed one today. Well, I think I did. I shot one today might be a better way to say it. To be honest, it was kind of hard to tell. He was so far off in the distance, and wind really whipped around the snow, so it was really hard to see anything. The thermal goggles barely even worked after 100 meters. He was running across a road maybe 500 out. I took the shot, and he fell down, but slowly dragged himself to his feet. I think I was too stunned to shoot him a second time. I don't know why I didn't. But it didn't feel as good as I thought it would. Didn't feel like anything. But it's not like I was looking him in his eyes when I shot him. Do they even have eyes? Maybe they have something entirely different. Other than that, I still don't know what they look like. It looked tall. I think they're supposed to be reptilian, or maybe amphibian. Don't quote me on it. I'm not a biologist. That was really all that happened today. PL says we're heading into a town here soon to look for signs of civilians. I wonder what the Askydians look like. I guess technically that's why I'm here. For them, that is. It's just weird thinking that I'm supposed to be here to save a species that I've never seen or heard of before. And now I'm fighting a species I've also never seen or heard of, until I shot one. For many in Eskydo, this was their first experience off-world. At the time of the conflict, only the most privileged and elite had been able to travel to other systems. Many who joined the war effort came from families who could not afford to go off-world, hoping for a chance to see the stars. They had no way of knowing just how brutal Eskydo would be. Quote from Political Inequality in a Galactic World by M.A.J. Matt Anderson. March 25, 2287 Terran Standard Calendar. I haven't written in a while. I've sent some recordings back home, but we're not getting any back. LT said it was because there's EW, electronic warfare, going on. I don't think that's the case. I mean, we're so advanced we can jump onto another planet, but can't send a simple recording out here? It is what it is, I guess. Just gotta focus on the mission and take it a day at a time. We didn't find any Askydians in the town we went to. Well, none that were alive. Most of them were just piles of ash mixed into the snow. Figure that's what lots of plasma fire does to someone. We didn't come across any of the enemies in the town either. Just the bodies and dust should be bodies. It's hard to believe that thousands of people lived in this burnt crater of a city at one point. The few bodies that weren't ash didn't look very good. I'm not sure if it's cause the Askydians looked like that to begin with or something else. I tell myself that's how they usually look. I try not to dwell on it too much. Tommy died this morning. He was our saw gunner, and he was a good dude. He never had any issues making us laugh when we were in the shit. Wish I had more things to say about him. I only knew him for a couple weeks. One second I was talking to him on security about his girl back in London, him showing me a frozen picture. The next he had a hole in his head. I had to roll him off the gun and return fire into one of the buildings down the road. We buried him in the shallow snow in some courtyard. They say we don't have the resources to bring the bodies back. I kept the picture that Tommy had in his hand when he died. Maybe I'll try to find his girl and give it to her. He never had the chance to tell me her name. We're leaving this place tomorrow, grouping up with some guys from 1st Armor. We're supposed to be light infantry, but I'd welcome a ride on a tank. I've always wanted to do that. Shit looked like so much fun in those historical pictures, and now I'm living it. It's one thing seeing those badass pics in books and imagining yourself doing it. It doesn't feel as badass actually going through it. Just feels normal. Terran armor units were rare on Eskydo. The thick snow that permanently covered the planet made it near impossible for tracked vehicles to traverse the hilly terrain. Eskydo saw the first introduction of armored hovercraft. Terrain Joint Forces Doctrine TP-113 updated after Eskydo conflict. March 29, 2287 Terran Standard Calendar. Urban Ops was the most fun thing we did in training. It was different here. We lost almost half the platoon today. Well, we were already at half strength to begin with after the drop. It wasn't a day I feel like dwelling on right now. I just want to curl up in my snow hole and sleep. That's all I'm going to write for today. I wonder if there's snow back in Boston right now. It'd be nice to have one thing in common with my friends and family back home. The intense urban operations on Eskydo were a disaster for Terran forces. Inferior weapons and armor posed a challenge to Terran infantrymen tasked with breaching buildings. The point man in the breach was usually the lowest-ranking soldier on the team. Excerpt from CQC on an Alien World by Lance Corporal Andrew Flores. General Karn placed the book down on his desk before letting out a long sigh. Deciding that the last entry for March was a good place to stop for a break. If he was hoping to get through the next 2 chapters this evening, he might need something a little stronger than this tea. He reached down and pressed a small button on the side of his desk, and one of his assistants made their way into the room. "How may I assist you, sir?" "Vanix. Clear my meeting with Oraxium General Tanix tomorrow. I think I'm going to make a day trip." "Of course, sir, right away. And would you please bring me that new human beverage that everyone is fawning over? The ethanol one?" he asked, unable to remember the direct human word for it. "Yes, sir. Any flavor that you have in mind?" "Do they have a flavor from this human settlement called Boston?" "I'll track it down, sir. See you shortly." The general turned back in his chair, looking to his left, his eyes fixated on the display case that housed his own Galactic Honor Medal. He thought about his time spent earning the award. He had made difficult decisions, had to sacrifice people he cared about for the betterment of others. Many people he cared about. But it had all seemed so impersonal. Just orders and commands from a terminal or through a comms channel. He had never been required to go through the experience of being on the ground when it was all going down, never had to witness it firsthand. Of the many books and articles that filled his digital library, they all described war from a statistical standpoint, measuring numbers against numbers, as if it were something that could be broken down into a cost-benefit analysis. He never had the need to read a first-hand account at his position. He regretted that it had taken him this long. March 30th, 2287, Terran Standard Calendar. I think writing about yesterday will make me feel better. I didn't get much sleep last night between the security shifts and the fire bombings. Once we ran them out of town, they must have decided to get this place off the map. Johnson ended up under one of the bombs. The snow melted around him, and once we got to him, he was frozen solid. He ended up in the same shallow snow hole as Tommy. We're inside burning the Escadon bodies and clothes to stay warm. Cook says it's minus 89 right now. Can't even take my helmet off to eat, otherwise I'd freeze. We've been sustaining ourselves with injections. I miss the taste of food. Right. About yesterday. We got word saying there was an enemy platoon holed up on the other end of town. PL gave us the brief, and in it we're supposed to cross 5 miles through this ghost town. As bad as it's been, I'd say this was the coolest part of it all. My favorite hobby back home was exploring all the abandoned buildings around town. There isn't much to do in Maynard except drive around and see old stuff. 'Cause, well, it's fucking Maynard. But this was like my own desolate city of ice to explore, ice and bodies. We pulled up on them around 1700 after a few hours of slow rucking. We were careful when we moved. So many windows and buildings, and each one could mean the death of us. PL let me call in the air support, said it would be good practice on the comms. Once we got the all clear from air, we moved in. First squad took the south side while second took the east. We only had enough of us for 2 squads now. On cue, Ramirez kicked in the door and I breached. They were right behind me. There were 3 of them sleeping on the floor inside and another 4 playing some game in the middle. I put 2 in one of the ones around the table as I made my way to the right corner. The first one I shot screamed and writhed on the floor while we all cleared the room. The rest of the team made quick work of the others. It felt good having my urban ops training pay off. Seemed easy so far. SGT Miller put a few into the ones that were still making some weird noises, somehow still alive. They bled just like us. I'm not sure what I was expecting. I mean, it makes sense. Maybe it would have felt cooler if it was purple like a video game. Would have been easier for me if they were more alien, less like us. It still felt like I was killing another human being, but I don't think we had a problem seeing them as something else. That first one I shot finally bled out when we finished our lace reports. It was clutching some picture when it died, just like Tommy. We moved to the next building. There were a few in the street still screaming. Screeching? Not sure how to describe the sound. From the chemical bombs before. I shot one as I walked over it. Seeing its scaled skin melting off looked like a bad way to go. Maybe that's what he was asking for. I hope that's what he was asking for. Only PL had a translator. I was point man again. They said I would keep doing it until I couldn't anymore. I know we don't have the means to bring back the bodies. I wonder if I'd be considered a body if I was only wounded. Kicked in the next door and did it again. It wasn't as clean the second time. Before I even got through the doorway, one of them pulled me to the ground. He saved my life in a way, because the next 2 guys who entered the room got dropped. Last man SGT Grom had the saw and laid into the room. I was on the ground with one of these monsters on top of me, a serrated blade coming down at my face. We rolled on the ground while the machine gun fire grazed over top of us. I started to pull my own blade out with my one free arm. I should count myself lucky that its teeth were stuck behind its suit. Guess they needed to stay warm, too. I finally got my knife out and stabbed it in the stomach. The cold air made its blood solidify around my blade after the first stab, and I couldn't pull it out. I rolled again, getting on top of him, and brought my helmet down onto its face. I did it again and again until SGT Grom pulled me off of him. I couldn't see anything anymore, the blood covering my goggles. Once I was calmed down, we scraped the icy red liquid off with a knife. I looked down at the body and there was a crater where its face should have been. Still haven't seen who I'm fighting. We couldn't do anything to help Ramirez or McCrae on the ground. Ramirez was still alive when we moved to the next building, shivering and gasping for air. SGT said there's nothing we can do to help. It's too cold. I would have felt better if we at least tried. Graham put down more covering fire as the last few guys of our squad moved to the final building. PL and the rest of the platoon seemed to be in their own fight on the other side of it. We consolidated into one team. I kicked in the door and did it again. They were ready for us this time. They didn't have much cover in the room, and I shot one in the face as I entered. I was nearly knocked back from something hitting my front plates, but was pushed forward by the rest of the team. Just following my training, I went to my corner like I'd been taught, peering over at what might be the next threat. I focused my rifle on the door to the next room. About that time it opened up and something was thrown through. I didn't have to guess what it was as I hit the ground. Thankfully, one of the bodies was there to block the blast. I stood up as 3 of them came through the door. I saw all 3 of them fall to my shots. Once we were sure the building was clear, we met up with what was left of the platoon. We lost 8 in total. Didn't have time to search the bodies or help anyone that was still alive. PL said we needed to move because there's enemy air coming in. We booked it out of there the way we came. I wonder if Ramirez was still alive when we left. We got back to the PB late that night. Supply crate had been dropped nearby. Being the last private that was still alive, I was one of the ones sent to grab it. You'd think that being able to traverse the stars and fight against aliens, we'd get the badass gear you see in all of those sci-fi stories. Guess a century without war really stagnates military advancement. What we have is way better than what it was 100 years ago, sure. But where's the energy shields and laser rifles? Maybe they have that stuff reserved for the high-speed special forces guys out here. We're staying in position for today, waiting on orders from higher, so I had the time to write this out. I didn't want to think about it, but it's best that someone records these kinds of things. Otherwise, nobody will ever know what we did out here. This way, nobody forgets the people we lost, or the shit we did. On Escaido, it was virtually impossible to render aid to fallen comrades. Once the environmental suit was breached, and the cold air made its way in, the body shut down in minutes. The only historical conflict in Terran history that could even be comparable to Escaido was the Korean War, which reached temperatures of -54 degrees Fahrenheit, 48 C. But they didn't have the luxury of temperature regulation suits back then. Excerpt from Escaido, A Modern-Day Korean War by Geiskett Billy, M.C. Reiner III. March 31, 2287, Terran Standard Calendar. I took my own head count when I got back with the equipment. For a platoon, we should have been about 40 strong. We had about a squad and a half now, 15 total. Higher says that we're still combat effective, regardless of the losses, Charlie Mike. Suppose we're not getting any others to come help us anytime soon. I guess I should be glad about that. Least happy for them that they don't have to be here with us. I got a couple hours to rest tonight. We consolidated our defenses into a smaller area for the time being, but we're going to be moving out tomorrow at sunrise. PL says it's not safe to stay in the patrol base longer than 24 hours, and we're already well past that, so we need to get a move on. No light pollution here means you get a good view of the stars under the night vision. I have to say one of the coolest things about Escaido is the rings. Looking up at the night sky right now makes me feel like I'm surviving on some fucked up version of Saturn. Not writing much tonight. Going to focus on getting some sleep. The rings on Escaido posed a major tactical and logistical issue to Terran forces during the initial incursion. Many hasty defenses were constructed about the rings to entrap enemy forces as they entered the Escaido system. Many Terran ships suffered devastating losses at the beginning of the conflict, due to being in close proximity to hidden nuclear explosive devices. Excerpt from Asymmetric Warfare on a Planetary Front by Terran Lieutenant General Stephen Smatkin III. Upon finishing the chapter, General Karn heard a knock at the door. He folded the corner of the page marking his place in the book. It wasn't often that he actually read a physical book. The humans seemed to be more traditional in that sense. He placed it down on his desk and beckoned them to enter. "It's open." "Sir, I cleared your schedule and tracked down the beverage you requested." "Ah, of course, thank you, and I assume there were no issues with the cancellation?" He was angry and was wondering what could take precedence over an important military meeting. Well, lucky for me, I am the one who organizes those meetings, so it's none of his concern. Anyway, book me transport to Earth tomorrow, first thing in the morning. Earth, sir? You're going to the Middle Rim? Yes, I just want to see the place for myself. And if I can possibly meet some people that are in this book. That will be all. Right away, sir, Valak said, bringing over a tray of solidified silica bottles containing the requested Terran liquid. The labeling on the bottle read, Samuel Adams Boston Lager. Karn sat back at his desk picking up a bottle and opened up his interface, checking through various news feeds and recent publications. The human book has made the rounds across many different systems. Many are criticizing its amateur writing style, or the sheer brutality of it. But even with that in mind, it's the most widespread book in the Republic in recent years. I am glad that it is getting the recognition it deserves. Even my own book wasn't this widely recognized. He took a sip of the Terran beverage. Well, this is awful. How can they get enough sales to mass-produce this stuff? He decided to power through the taste of the beverage, thinking it would help him relate with the deceased Terran soldier. Looking back at the story, it was quite different from most accounts, to say the least. Such depictions of war that do not display it as heroic and majestic are usually not as popular with a wider audience. People like to see a hero that can conquer all and shows no weakness. But he began to understand that's not how it is in reality. It's not numbers and statistics or countless valiant heroes who all commit great feats that are remembered by all. It's just young sapients thrown into a foreign world beyond their comprehension and expected to achieve things that nobody should be asked to do. He picked the book back up once more, content with reading another chapter before retiring for the night. Or a couple, as he has become quite invested in the life of this common soldier whom he shares almost no similarities with. April 2nd, 2287 Terran Standard Calendar. IDF is something else, let me say that. 1 second you're walking along just going about the routine, next thing you know you can't hear or see shit with all the snow it's whipping up around here. If it weren't for the comms in my helmet, no way I would have heard where to run. Going from town to town around here isn't easy. Just walking across vast fields, only cover is the occasional giant spike of ice and rock sticking out of the ground. I just took off in the direction they said to run. If I get hit, I get hit. Not like there'll be much left of me to feel it anyway, so it's better to keep running. Saw the guy in front of me. Wish I remembered his name. Fall into a crevasse. One moment he was there, next the snow gave out underneath him, and he fell into this pit that was darker than the night sky. We took cover underneath one of the shards. That's what we're calling the large spikes sticking out of the ground around here. Got the all clear a few minutes later to start stepping again. We lost 2 more, down to 12 in our platoon now, if you could even call us a platoon now. We got ambushed getting into town today. Graham said I should count myself lucky it wasn't a near-side ambush. They were about 200 meters out on the ridgeline of a snow cornice when they opened fire on us. With no cover around, half of us shot back, while the other half dug in the snow frantically to make some semblance of cover. Sergeant Mickey was behind me digging while I was shooting. He yelled at me to jump into the hole he dug about the same time he took a shot to the hand. It pierced his glove, and I could already tell it wasn't good. With his suit pierced, he wouldn't last long, even if it was just his hand. I taped up the hole, and he was already starting to shiver and go into temperature shock. Doc jumped over and stabilized him, but it was clear Mickey was ever going to be able to play the violin again after this. Sorry I shouldn't make jokes like that. Mickey died there in that unremarkable stretch of white snow. We had to leave him. PL said we wouldn't have the extra weight slowing us down. Doc overdosed him on painkillers as we left so he wouldn't suffer. We lasted long enough for PL to get air support in. Didn't see any more of him after that. We lost another. 10 of us left now, and we've only been here a little over a month. We set up in a much smaller town than the last one, but this one was different. We got into the center of the village when we saw the pile. There had to be at least 1,000 of them, if not more. I'd never seen this many Ascadians in one place. I can't really tell the ages apart, but they were all different sizes. I guess these snakes are more focused on fighting the civilians than us. You could tell there wasn't an attempt to dig mass graves. They just resorted to throwing all the bodies into the pile in the center of town. There was a big banner hanging over it strung up between the buildings that read their symbology. I asked PL what it said since he was the only one with the translator. He told me not to worry about it. What struck me as odd here was that they weren't piles of ash. You know, like what happens when they're shot with plasma. They were crushed, sliced, whatever else, you name it. Seems like they made a point to leave the bodies intact. Why? Beats the fuck out of me. I'm just here to do my job, not wonder why they're killing all the civvies. We set up the PB as far from the bodies as we could. Not sure what this building was supposed to be for. I don't know the first thing about their culture or their world, so its purpose was lost on me. It looked nice, though. Much more intricate than the other buildings I've been in. There was a lot of frozen blood in here. Looked like the citizens of this town tried to hold up in this building but were all dragged out to add to the pile. A few days in, and it became clear what the true purpose of the war on Escido was. The clues weren't hidden, far from it. It was quite evident what they were doing. The piles made the rounds fast, they were everywhere. Then the facilities started being found, and that revealed just how extensive their operation was. It wasn't an occupation or conquest or anything like that. It was an extermination. Excerpt from The Ascadian Xenocide, the first but not the last, by Dr. Caspian Crew. April 4th, 2287, Terran Standard Calendar. Morale has never been this high. We got a space cat. Not sure how else to describe the little guy. They put me in charge of taking care of him as the sole surviving private. He must have been native to this planet, 'cause he's got so much fur on him you can barely tell what he's supposed to look like. Just this big ball of fluff that loves cuddling with us in our snowholes. We came up with a fun name for our shitty snow foxholes. It's like a cat 'cause he's got the 2 ears and the 2 eyes, which from what I'm tracking is pretty rare in the rest of the galaxy. 6 legs, though. He's pretty goofy looking the way he waddles around over the snow to stop from sinking in. We named him Wintergreen. It's the only flavor of nicotine pouches we get out here due to some deal a corpo made with Big Army and the new MREs. It was SGT Miller's idea, not mine, but the guys loved it, so it stuck. I'm sure those shareholders are living it up back on Earth, rolling in that defense budget money. And here I am, cuddling Lil Wintergreen because no matter how cold it gets, I can still feel his warmth through the suit. I miss feeling warm. It's been a month since I've felt any warmth, much less the heat of anyone or anything other than myself or a fire fueled by bodies. That's a luxury I'll never take for granted again. Once I'm out of here, fuck the mountains, fuck the snow, all that cold, icy shit. I'm going to a beach in the Caribbean, buying a boat and enjoying year-round summer temps. April 7th, 2287, Terran Standard Calendar. Joint Operations. It's been a while since we've had anyone to help us out here, so it was a welcome reprieve when PL mumbled those words through frostbitten lips. Then he said the word, Marines. Fucking hell, why'd it have to be the Marines? Don't get me wrong, I respect the Marines, I appreciate any infantry support we can get out here. But riddle me this. Have you ever met a Marine who isn't at least a little bit of a dick about how he's a Marine, and he's a divine gift to this universe because of it? Maybe a couple, I concede. But still working with them can be a pain. Now, after the mission, fuck, I'm glad we had the Marines there with us. Without the Marines, taking the Spire wouldn't have been possible. We were tasked with conducting an amphibious assault on an island. Notice how I put both of those words in quotes. You'd be hard-pressed to find any liquid water on this hunk of ice, much less an actual island. However, it was a frozen ocean we were assaulting across on armored hovercraft. So in their great military intellect, the higher-ups deemed that the Marines would be a key military component to the operation. They weren't wrong. They knew more about dismounting onto contested beaches and assaulting through than we did, so we were attached to a Marine company. I think in total we were the only Army platoon, if you could even call us that at this point, attached to an entire Marine division, the 1st Marine Division from the old U.S. Their CO gave the company OPORD, and we were on our way. Sent 100 miles across a frozen plain on these hastily made hovercraft to take a mountain that jutted out of the solid sea. It stretched about a mile into the sky and a few miles offshore from the nearest continent. We hit the beach under more fire than I thought possible. Why was our command throwing us at a mountain in the middle of nowhere? That's beyond me. But all I knew is that we had to take that hill or die trying, and die trying we did. During the couple-hour ride over, we got into an argument with First Marine guys about how Hokkaido ain't shit compared to what they did in Korea. Like any of them even studied Korea, let alone had any relatives in it. Our PL informed them that there were just as many Army guys at Chosen as Marine, but they didn't care. That carried on for a while until we started getting fired upon. It was pretty interesting to see that once shit started to hit the fan, that the rivalries died down. Everyone kinda consolidated together and started to see each other as one and the same. Regardless of the centuries-old rivalries, we're all here together, in the shit, with the same mission in mind. Take the hill, or die on our way up the hill, no other way about it. We hit that beach with a fire in our hearts that burned bright enough to melt all the ice on Hokkaido. The frenzy of orders coming from the NCOs of both units kept us on task, moving across the beach, onto the hills, up the mountain, and into the bunkers. We stormed and took down their fortress as if it were made of plywood. Granted, we had a few thousand more than they did, and traversing the mountainous terrain took a few days, but in the end, our dead nearly matched theirs. Considering you usually want 3-to-1 odds for an attack, and 1-to-3 for a defense, it was pretty good. I'm currently writing this from the peak of Hill 28,885, not 50 meters from the old enemy headquarters. Joint operations between Marine and Army divisions on Hokkaido transcended any rivalry that is currently present in any armed forces across the galaxy. During my time there, I came to respect the Navy, the Space Force, and the Air Force, but the Marines above anyone else. Fighting alongside Marines on Hokkaido was like fighting alongside a cornered animal who never had anything to lose in the first place. No matter how bad the conditions, no matter how great the casualties, no matter how fucking brutal it gets, they will keep fighting alongside you until the bitter end. I literally saw men who knew they were going to die, and they went out with a smile on their face and bled out in a pile of spent brass and bodies. TSGT Brian Jones, A Living Hell, Hokkaido.